There's probably a couple of favorite things that you have in Final Cut Pro that you haven't seen in Avid and you wonder whether they exist. And let's go over a couple of those things to allay some of those fears. In no particular order, the voiceover tool. And the voiceover tool in Avid is actually called Audio Punch-In. There it is, and I can't go over all of the settings, but that's how you do voiceover in Avid. Motion tab is probably the next thing you want to know about. The way you get access to that same functionality is basically Command 8 to call up your effects tab and drop in probably a picture-in-picture or a 3D warp and put it on the clip that you want to affect, and then go into effects mode to be able to change those parameters. Superimpose might be another thing that you wonder, how do I do a superimpose? The way superimposes are done, basically you need to patch your track from V1 to V2, load something in the source monitor that you want to superimpose, maybe mark an in and an out, and overwrite that. And with that there, once again, call up the effect palette and drop in a superimpose if you want to actually superimpose it, kind of dissolve it over. If you're trying to key it or something like that, then anything with an alpha channel, when you put it in that second track, will automatically superimpose. Something else that you might be wondering about is titling. In Final Cut Pro, if you want to add a title, you come here, go into your controls menu, type in some text, and you've got a title. In Avid, actually, I prefer the functionality that you go to the title tool and you type in some text, because you're able to instantly move this stuff and really see what you see is what you get when you're typing. You don't have to worry about where something's positioned. You can actually see it as you're positioning it over video. So in Final Cut Pro, one of the useful things is to be able to see your waveforms in your source monitor, to be able to see the source waveform. Well, I showed you how to do it in the sequence side, in the timeline. It's definitely pretty easy to see. You can see that I've got brand recording AIFF loaded up here in my source monitor. There's no way to see those waveforms in this. This is video only. But you can see your source waveforms by simply switching your timeline to monitoring your source monitor. So if I click on this button down here, the toggle source record and timeline button, now what I have is the waveform for my source instead of the waveform for my sequence. If I want my sequence back, I just click on the same button and that toggles me back to my sequence. So one of the other things you can do in Final Cut Pro is to gang two monitors together. There's a button up here called the gang button, and if you click on the gang button and move in the record monitor, you can see that your source monitor is moving at the same rate. If I do frame by frame, the source monitor is ganged to the record monitor. In other words, the two are locked together in time. The other thing that you may be wondering how to do is zooming in on the monitors. And in Final Cut Pro, it's pretty simple. You click on the monitor and hit Command plus and minus, and that zooms in and out. In Avid, click on your monitor. You use Command K to shrink and Command L to enlarge. Another thing you may be wondering how to do is to show overlays, for example, like Safe Title. Pretty simple. You can go to this fast menu right here and choose the grid button right there, and that will put an overlay on whichever monitor is active. Add one to the sequence side. Boom, there it is. You can also map that, of course, to your timeline, for example. If you just want to be able to turn that off and on, it's pretty simple to just one click, or you can even map it to your keyboard so it's a button click to turn overlays of your safe title and safe action on and off. Another similar thing is to show timecode overlays. There's really no way to show timecode overlays, but to me, as good or even better of a solution is that your timecode is always up here above your monitors. It's always completely configurable. You can choose whether you want to see the source track timecode or whether you want to see your master timecode, whether you want to see it in footage or timecode or frames or any of these other things. All of those things are choosable right from here, and you can have them be different. If you want the top one to be the master timecode and the bottom one to be your source video timecode, you can see how these compare, for example. Source side is the same way. You can simply choose, maybe you want video on the top and audio on the bottom. You just switch them. Show recent source items. This is a good one. Instead of having to always find from your bin, find a clip, you can actually choose any of your previous shots that have been loaded into the source monitor, you can simply select them from right here. If I had a larger selection of clips up here that I'd loaded into my source monitor, my list would be longer than one here, but I can switch back and forth to previous clips right here. How do you do that in Avid? If you look in the source monitor side up here where the name of the clip is, if you click on the name of the clip, all the previous clips that have been loaded in, for example, that same suspension shot, they're right there, and all you have to do is select them from this monitor. Another thing in Final Cut that you may want to know how to do is how do you load slug, for example. The way to get slug is in the same menu as we got our previous clips. Choose load filler, and load filler is Avid's name for slug. Another thing that's in the same area is bars and tone. I gotta admit that this is a little harder to do, but once you've done it only one time and it's saved in your bin, you never have to do this procedure again. The first thing is we need tone. And as I showed you earlier in the training, if you go to your audio tool and click PH, down here at the bottom is Create Tone Media, and you can choose all these options for tone media, whether you want 2 tracks of tone media or whatever, and click OK. That creates in your bin a tone clip, and there it is, and if I hit it, you've got tone. What about bars? Well, as you can see, I've previously imported bars already. If I just wanted to cut bars in now, I'd just cut them in. But how do you get bars into your system in the first place? You have to select a bin, choose import, you have to go to your hard drive, you have to go to your applications folder, and you have to find your Avid folder. There it is, Avid Media Composer. Inside Avid Media Composer are supporting files down at the bottom. Down at the bottom of supporting files are test patterns. And inside test patterns, there's a myriad of different kinds of bars, SD bars, NTSC bars. There's even multi-burst and ramps. So if you don't just want simple bars, if you want a couple of different test patterns, you can get those. Let's try this empty bars and choose open. Now, before I do this, one thing I do want to caution you about is the options that you choose when you go into this. You want image sized for current format because Avid chose the proper size and shape for these color bars. And also, these color bars are 601 color bars. They're not RGB color bars. So you have to have 601 chosen as an option here instead of computer for them to be brought in with the proper levels. Choose OK and open, and it imports empty color bars, and then you can cut those into your sequence. See, that sounds like a lot of work, but basically you only have to do it once. Once these bars are imported into a project, you can go and find these bars from any other project by simply opening the same bin. One of the things I do at my shop is I have a project, and the only thing that's in that project are editing things like color bars, slates, tone, various elements that I use in every single edit. And so my color bars are in there, and when I open a new project for a client, one of the first bins that I open for that client is from that editing elements bin. So my color bars and all that stuff are easily accessible to me from there. Some of the other things that you're probably missing are all these tools along the side, and most of these tools Avid either doesn't need or does them in some other way, or it doesn't have them, but I'll explain the ones that it does. For example, you've got your razor blade tool. In Avid, the razor blade tool is basically called the add edit tool. If you park anywhere that you want an add edit, and you just click this button right here, which is your add edit button, click it, and you can see that you've created an add edit or razor blade edit. Just that simply and quickly. This button can be mapped to your keyboard, so then all you have to do is position it, tap your keyboard, and you've added an edit. One of the other really great tools in Final Cut Pro, and has always been a nice option, has been the Select Track Forward tool. Up until the release of Media Composer 5, you could not do this in Media Composer, but now you can. If you go to Command 3, which remember calls up your command palette, you'll notice in your Edit tab, the Select Left and Select Right buttons. Basically, the Select Right button is the same function in Final Cut Pro, and Select Left just does the reverse. So you can use the Select Left button, which takes all the things from the front of the sequence and allows you to move them separately from those at the back half of the sequence. And finally, let's talk about snapping. How do you turn on and off snapping? In Final Cut Pro, it's pretty simple. You tap the N key, right? There is no snapping lock, really. Snapping is never on unless you hold down the Command key. And then once you hold down the Command key, it stays on as long as you're holding down the Command key. You can see that it's jumping to edit points. You can see that I have some locators. It will also snap to locators. If I had auto gain on, it would also snap to keyframes and audio. So basically, instead of N on Final Cut Pro, you hold down the Command key. And that's it. That's where to find all your favorite Final Cut Pro stuff in the Avid.